Hey guys, it's Andriatic. Today I wanted to try something a little different and make a video that consists of one general tip for each support hero. Contrary to what you may believe, I don't play only Mercy, and I actually play all the supports quite a bit. Mercy is just my favorite, and that's why my content mostly focuses around her. Actually, admittedly, Mercy isn't even my most played hero this season, it's Kiriko, but that also kinda has to do with Junker Queen being meta at the moment. Anyways, most of these tips will be fairly simple, but I'm hoping they may be beneficial to lower ranked support players or support players who are looking to expand their roster. If you want to see more in-depth guides on specific supports, let me know and I may work on them. And of course, if you're looking for Mercy guides specifically, I have quite a few of those on here on the channel already. With all that out of the way, let's begin with the first support hero, Ana. For Ana, an essential tech that you need to learn if you haven't already is quickscoping. Ana has two modes of fire, projectile unscoped shots and hit scan scoped shots. Both have their pros and cons, and projectile unscoped shots are best for close to mid-range and are easier to hit on larger targets. Since these shots are projectile, they have a travel time and are thus a little harder to hit on targets at a distance, especially those that are on smaller or more agile targets. Scoped hit scan shots, on the other hand, are best for mid to long range and are great for accurately hitting targets as they are hit scan shots. This means that whatever the crosshair is on will be hit the second you fire the weapon, or in other words, they have no travel time. The downside to this, however, is that scoped shots have a slightly obscured vision and they also slow down your movement. Because of these factors, hard scoping on Ana is really only something you want to be doing when you're in a safe spot away from the fight. This is where quickscope shots come in. Quickscope shots are performed by quickly scoping in and instantly firing your weapon. This allows you to quickly shoot an accurate hit scan shot without obstructing your movement in the middle of a fight. If timed perfectly, you won't even have the vision obscured by your scope. Quickscope shots are great for when you're repositioning as Ana, as it allows you to keep moving at normal speed but still apply instantaneous and accurate shots from any range. There is one drawback to quickscoping as Ana though, and that is the fact that quickscoping results in a slower fire rate. Because of this factor, you don't want to be quickscoping every shot you take, and rather you want to weave in quickscopes along with the other two types of shots in order to maximize your value. Moving on to Baptiste, I think a common thing that inexperienced Baptiste players overlook is how his regenerative burst works. Regen burst heals Bap and any teammates around him, which is something I'm pretty sure everyone should know at this point, but something many people neglect is that it actually heals more when your allies are lower HP, so timing it right can lead to better overall value. For targets that are above half HP, Regen Burst is 50 instant burst healing, and then an extra 50 HPS over 5 seconds. This leads to a total healing of 100 HP. For targets that are below half HP, Regen Burst is an instant 100 HP burst healing, and then heals for the same 50 HP over 5 seconds, which heals for a total of 150 HP. Knowing this fact, you can either watch your own health bar or your allies and time Regen Burst in a way that it gets the most value. Trust me when I say it's very noticeable when you're trying to kill a Bap and he Regen Bursts on low HP. That instant 100 HP is extremely strong in saving people who are about to die, especially since for a majority of heroes, 100 HP is half of their health. This ability is also intentionally designed to synchronize with Immortality Field, as Immortality Field keeps people alive at very low HP, so that's also something to keep in mind if you get a really good lamp off. I find that low-ranked or inexperienced Brig players have a tendency to struggle the most with her general playstyle and positioning. It's not uncommon for people to assume that since Brig has a shield, she should be up front like a Reinhardt, when in reality, that's a great way to get yourself sent back to the spawn room. My tip for Brig is a reminder that Brigitte is a hero that should be played mainly defensively. She's best utilized as someone who protects her team, as the enemy engages onto them and shouldn't be the one on the front lines. Brig is great at protecting her second support and DPS, and those are her main duties. Using your shield to block damage for yourself and an ally, and using your flail whip to boop enemies away from your team are where most of your value is going to be coming from. Shield Bash is mostly a movement tool which you want to use to get to your ally to protect them, or to save yourself. It's not something you're using for damage in most scenarios, unless someone's super low. Additionally, by playing defensively in the case of flail whipping an enemy off of your Ana for example, you're also healing them through Inspire. All these factors are things to consider when playing Brig, and that's where most of her value as a support comes from. Also, don't feel the need to feed for Inspire. You get Inspire by doing damage of course, but you also heal a pretty good amount from just your packs. Don't jump past your tank to hit a whip shot just so you can proc Inspire. Wait till the enemy comes to you and activate Inspire when it's needed most. And this is All not to say that Brig can't be used offensively, of course, but it's important to understand when it's appropriate and when it's not, and you generally want to focus on a more defensive positioning style a majority of times. So next time you're on Brig, don't be afraid to position on the high ground with your Ana and keep pesky dive heroes off of her. You'll get much more value ensuring your other support stays alive than you would trying to frontline with your tank, and your other support will greatly thank you for that. The tip I have on Kiriko is a small adjustment to your gameplay that may raise your APM slightly. It won't make a huge difference in most situations, but I think it's a good habit to have, and it's something that I think people often really just don't think about, and that's remembering that just like heroes like Tracer or Sombra, Kiri can turn her camera during her TP animation. This is less important for PC players or those who have a high sensitivity, but is something especially important on console. Turning and facing the direction you want as you're TPing allows you to instantly be facing either an enemy you're facing or someone you're healing, which can be important in the fast-paced nature of Overwatch. As I've said, this is especially important for console players specifically, or those with slow sensitivities. This is because the difference between TPing, turning around, and then doing whatever you want is much slower than it would be as if you started the turn during your teleport animation. If you play with a fast enough sense that you can just 180 very quickly, this tip does become less important, but overall, I think building this habit into your gameplay will help Kiriko feel a little more smooth and helps your actions flow together better. Moving on to Lifeweaver, I think people should be more flexible with how they use his ultimate. Many people look at the Tree of Life and just use it defensively for its burst healing, which is a great and standard usage of it, but it's just as good, if not better, used as a way to LOS either the enemy or your own team. Treating the tree as a healing Mei wall is a great way to block off enemies from either escaping from you or being able to advance onto your team. It's perfectly shaped to be able to block doorways and such, and can also be used to block ultimates like Blizzard, Gravitic Flux, Diva Bomb, and others. It's also important to note that if you use the tree in this way, you can manually destroy the tree after by pressing your ultimate button again. This is good since you may only want to block areas for a specific time. This is also important to know as you cannot build ultimate charge while the tree is active, so destroying it manually after a one fight or after it has fulfilled its use will allow you to build another tree sooner. My Lucio tip is fairly simple and pretty quick, and that's just to consider how Sound Barrier works when being cast. Lucio briefly jumps into the air, and when he lands on the ground, he activates Sound Barrier, and any ally around him or gets hit by the preceding pulse gets the Sound Barrier applied to them. Keeping this in mind, the cast time of Sound Barrier can vary and depends on how high he's jumping from. It may seem cool to jump off of a roof and Sound Barrier from the sky, but this doesn't actually provide any benefit other than making your cast time longer, which gives the enemy more time to react. So in order to reduce the cast time and be able to react with faster beat drops, try using your ultimate next to a prop and then landing on said prop. This will make it so that Lucio has less space between him and the ground, allowing you to cast beat faster, which can be important in using it as a reactionary tool. Moving on to Mercy, the tip I want to give is one I've talked about before, but want to reinforce, as I believe it's really important, and that tip is my 3 questions for Res. Res is a very impactful yet high risk ability, and a lot of times people see someone die and just instantly go to try and res without thinking about it. Stopping and asking yourself these 3 questions before you go for a res will help you decide whether or not it's safe. 1. Is this res safe or even possible? You want to ask yourself this first, because obviously going for a res where you're just going to die instantly doesn't make much sense. You also want to consider the fact that maybe this res isn't safe right now, but an opportunity may come later. There are times for sure that resurrects are best done quickly, but there are also plenty of situations where you may want to wait it out or res later. Overwatch is a fast-paced game and attention shift. People can't always guard a res for the full duration, and waiting for an opportunity may allow you to successfully get it off. Also make sure that just because you get the res off, that you don't die somewhat after the fact by being out of position. In most cases, trading your life for a res is not really worth it. 2. Can my team afford to be without my resources for at least 1.75 seconds? You want to ask yourself this because you're essentially AFK while rezzing. You're unable to heal or damage boost your team, and if you're rezzing your second support, for example, then your team effectively has 0 healing for about 2 seconds. Can they afford this? In most cases, letting someone on your team die just so you can bring someone else back isn't worth it, although there are situations where it can be worth it. In addition to taking into account the 1.75 second cast time, you also want to take into consideration the amount of time it takes you to get to the soul orb and the amount of time it takes you to get back to your team. This is something to consider mainly if the soul orb is far away from the fight. And 3. Will my ally live after I get this resurrect off? Finally, you want to ask yourself this, because what's the point of rezzing someone if they just instantly die anyways because you res them into a bad position? Obviously, this cannot be predicted in some situations such as Widow 1v1s for example, but it is important to consider this, as otherwise you've not only wasted your own cooldown, but also staggered your teammate by forcing them to go through the respawn timer twice. This also feeds the enemy more ult charge, as they get the benefit of killing your teammate twice. Thinking and asking yourself these 3 questions before going for a res will reduce how often you have bed resurrects that hurt your team, either by feeding your ally or yourself to the enemy. Remember when asking that first question that you can be creative and try to look for creative or unexpected res angles that may help you get the res off easier. Remember, you have plenty of time to think. Sometimes being faster and instantly resing is better, but in those cases try to plan ahead if you can. Moira's tip is fairly simple, and that's just that you should master your fade jump techs. This is something you'll master with practice and time, and they're highly important to Moira's gameplay, and if used correctly, they can actually help you create lots of space for your team. These can be done many ways, but most often you can get extra height or distance by jumping off of props or even just jumping mid-fade. Finding new spots to use these and mastering these techs are just as important to Moira as super jump is to Mercy. Contrary to popular belief, the quote-unquote TikTok Moira playstyle is actually her most effective playstyle, but it takes a lot of game sense and proper positioning to play correctly and actually get value out of. Mastering fade jumps assists in both this playstyle and a regular healing Moira playstyle, as they allow you to either dive enemies or get to allies quickly in need. Being unpredictable with fade jumps can also be very disorienting for the enemy team to deal with and can distract them for large amounts of time or aid in 1v1s when you're trying to eliminate an enemy. Finally, onto the last support, we have Zenyatta. I think everyone knows that Zenyatta gets most of his value out of Discord Orb, and it's by far the most important part of his kit. Discord is extremely strong, especially when applied constantly to a target like a tank. I mean, if you play tank yourself or know someone who does, Discord has probably been complained about in your games, as playing against it can be absolutely miserable. However, a common bad habit of inexperienced Zen players is that they rotate their Discord around too often, just spamming it from target to target with no real reason. So my tip is to focus Discord on one target primarily for extended periods of time. Choosing this target can depend on multiple factors. Usually someone you or most of your team is looking at is a good idea, so the obvious default target is to just perma-slap Discord onto a tank, leave it there, and watch them suffer. You get most value out of Discord Orb when it's applied to one target like a tank, as it forces them to play around the orb or get melted. If you're rotating Discord too often to too many targets with no real reason or meaning behind it, you're relieving a lot of pressure you could otherwise put on the enemy. Obviously, as I've said, you'll have to decide when and who you want to Discord by putting it on someone you want your team to focus, or if you see your team focusing someone already, putting on them can help confirm that elimination. Of course, anyone you're attempting to 1v1 should be Discorded automatically to assist yourself and anyone who may try to peel for you. But outside of that, try to think about what you're orbing rather than just rotating around with no rhyme or reason. And that's all from me. I hope some of these tips help improve your support gameplay or help you better understand heroes you may be less familiar with. Like and subscribe for more support gameplay and content. Thanks for watching and have a great day.